Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Thursday, October 10, 2024. Hurricane Milton moves off Florida's east coast into the Atlantic Ocean, leaving behind a path of destruction across the state from fierce winds, rain, and storm surge. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, Senator Rick Scott, and President Joe Biden give updates on the start of the recovery. While there's little concern about FEMA running out of money to respond to Hurricane Milton and Hurricane Helene, the Small Business Administration may need an infusion of cash. President Biden and House Speaker Mike Johnson talk about whether Congress should return to session from recess to deal with that. Labor Department says inflation fell to 2.4% in September compared to a year ago. Donald Trump, Republican presidential nominee, comments on it at a speech at the Detroit Economic Club. TD Bank pleads guilty and agrees to $3 billion in fines on federal charges. The bank made it convenient for criminals to open accounts and launder money, sometimes with the willing help of bank employees. We will hear from Attorney General Merrick Garland. Also, from two high-profile U.S. Senate debates in Maryland between Republican Larry Hogan and Democrat Angela Alsobrooks, and in Arizona between Democrat Ruben Gallego and Republican Kari Lake. United Nations accuses Israel of intentionally firing on UN peacekeepers in Lebanon. And social justice activist Ethel Kennedy, wife of the late Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, has died at the age of 96. Associated Press reports from Tampa, Florida, Hurricane Milton barreled into the Atlantic Ocean on Thursday after plowing across Florida, where it knocked out power to more than 3 million customers and whipped up 150 tornadoes. The storm caused at least 5 deaths and compounded the misery wrought by Helene, while sparing Tampa a direct hit. The system tracked to the south in the final hours and made landfall late Wednesday as a Category 3 storm in Siesta Key, about 70 miles south of Tampa. Damage was widespread, and water levels may continue to rise for days, but Governor DeSantis said it was not the worst-case scenario. That was reporting from Associated Press. Governor DeSantis started his day at the Emergency Operations Center in the capital, Tallahassee.
The storm was significant, but thankfully this was not the worst case scenario. The storm did weaken before landfall, and the storm surge, as initially reported, has not been as significant overall as what was observed for Hurricane Helene. Right now, it looks like Sarasota County had the most significant storm surge, likely somewhere between 8 to 10 feet. And remember, with Helene, we had 15 to 20 feet up in Taylor County. Rescue missions have been underway throughout the night. State search and rescue teams report at least 48 individuals have been rescued as of 0630. National Guard search and rescue teams have worked overnight and successfully executed rescues of families and pets on the West Coast and from the destruction of the tornadoes in the central and eastern parts of Florida. The Guard continues to work into the morning and have 31 rescue aircraft operational and hundreds of rescuers engaged in over 125 active missions in 26 different counties. Over 6,500 soldiers are deployed throughout the state. Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission has made land and water rescues in Pinellas, Hillsborough, and Pasco County. The State Guard has also been engaged in search and rescue, assisting with floodwater evacuations as well as damage assessments. There are currently 3.1 million accounts without power. There have been 635,000 restorations since Hurricane Milton hit Florida. The areas that have the most significant outages as of this morning are Hillsborough, 75% out, Hardy, 97% out, Manatee, 82% out, Pinellas, 68% out, and Sarasota, 75% out. Of course, there are 50,000 plus linemen that have been pre-staged. A lot of what they'll do this morning is likely assess the damage and then begin restoration operations very quickly. And we appreciate everybody that's in that fight because that's very important for a lot of people.
Governor Ron DeSantis, Republican of Florida, early this morning at the State Operations Center in Tallahassee before heading out to see the damage from Hurricane Milton and the recovery operations around the state. Associated Press followed him, writing at a Thursday afternoon briefing in Sarasota. DeSantis said that after flying over some of the hard-hit areas, he saw that many of the homes built in recent years fared well in the storm. He said, another thing I think I can say are buildings that were built in the last 20 or 30 years, they did very well. Senator Rick Scott, Republican of Florida, conducted a phone interview this morning with Fox News Channel.
I'm in Naples. We had to evacuate our house. And so, this is the assessment time. This is the time that all of our search and rescue teams are starting up as soon as daylight. They've been responding all night, of course, but they're going to go out, try to make sure everybody's alive. It's pretty scary when you think about what the storm surge was south of Tampa. But like Janice said, the flooding is going to be unbelievable places. We're going to continue to have a lot of trees down, a lot of power outages. So this is a time for people to be very, very cautious. You need to continue to shelter in place. You need to continue to listen to the local officials to tell you whether you can go out, where you can go. It's not the time to be out there gawking at what happened. And then we got wind, we got rain, we got flooding, we got storm surge, and we got tornadoes. Talked to the sheriff of St. Lucie County, and he said there's several deaths with the tornado hit them, but that wasn't the only county. We had a lot of counties that had horrible tornadoes. And so my heart goes out to everybody who went through this. We're strong. We're going to rebuild, but we've got a great emergency response team. Our chief fire marshal, Jimmy Petronis, is working hard already.
Senator, you said that there were deaths in St. Lucie County because we understand there were about 17 different twisters down there. So is that in the retirement home? Is that what you heard?
Yeah, they said there were several deaths in the retirement community. So we'll get a better assessment today of exactly what happened. But unfortunately, we're going to have fatalities way far away from the storm surge, way far away from the path of the storm. With these unbelievable tornadoes, the most tornado warnings, I guess, in history of the state of any day. And talking to some of these sheriffs, they think it was just horrible in their county. So with that, which were not going to get impacted by the wind.
Senator Rick Scott, Republican of Florida, in a telephone interview this morning on Fox News Channel. The Pentagon Press Secretary, Major General Pat Ryder, told reporters today that more than 6,500 members of the Florida National Guard have been activated, and an additional 3,000 from 19 states are ready to offer support. He said 500-plus high-water vehicles, 26 helicopters, and more than a dozen watercraft from 12 states have been mobilized for recovery from the storm. The White House press office putting out a statement. Today, the president spoke with several Florida officials following the impacts of Hurricane Milton across the Florida peninsula, including Senator Rick Scott, Representative Anna Paulina Luna, Gainesville Mayor Harvey Ward, Fort Myers Mayor Kevin Anderson, Orange County Mayor Jerry Demings, and Pasco County Chair Ron Oakley. The president told each of these leaders to call him directly if they need additional assistance on rescue, response, and recovery efforts. The president also emphasized that he will be with them and their communities no matter how long it takes. That statement from the White House press office. President Joe Biden later spoke from the White House.
The Vice President and I have just convened a meeting this morning with the leaders of the Department of Homeland Security, Department of Defense, including NORTHCOM Commander, who has responsibility for providing defense support to civilian authorities. And that apparently is going very well. As well as from the Coast Guard and from FEMA, we've received reports. We focused on what the American military can do like no one else can, provide emergency support for communities in need, and we're required by the governor in required by the governor in the affected states. And I've spoken to all the governors. Not today, all of them, but I've spoken to all of them thus far. And how we can be ready to go in an instant when the call comes. At my direction, the Defense Secretary Austin has provided a range of capabilities both to Florida for Hurricane Milton, as well as the states impacted by Hurricane Helene. And the more capabilities are available, we assess the pressing needs, we can get whatever they need. To the servicemen and women who are on the ground responding to these disasters, thank you. Thank you for your professionalism, your dedication to every mission you're given, and you're repeating it again. This is a whole of government effort. It also includes the Department of Energy, Department of Transportation, Department of Health and Human Services, and the Department of Housing and Urban Development, which is providing mortgage relief for impacted homeowners. As directed, FEMA is going to open disaster recovery centers all across the impacted communities right away. So there's one stop the residents can go to learn about the support they might need, and they'll be advertised where those places are. 3 million people are without power. but more than 40 million power line workers have come from around the country, from Canada to Florida, to restore power across the state. In addition, the Federal Aviation has authorized Florida Power and Light to fly large drones before other manned aircraft can get up in the sky to quickly assess the damage on the ground so ground crews can restore power as quickly as possible. The Coast Guard and the Army Corps of Engineers are assessing how fast they can reopen the port of Tampa to get fuel, food, water, and other basic goods flowing into the area again and quickly. Additionally, Vice President Harris and I said yesterday, and we'll say it again, to anyone who seeks to take advantage of our fellow Americans' desperation, whether you're a company engaging in price gouging or a citizen trying to scam your neighbors, we will go after you and we will hold you accountable. Now, not only that, our fellow Americans are putting their lives on the line to do this dangerous work and receive death penalties. Some received death penalties yesterday as a result of reckless, irresponsible, relentless disinformation and outright lies that continue to flow. Those who engage in such lies are undermining confidence in the rescue and recovery work that's opening and ongoing. As I speak, they're continuing. These lies are also harmful to those who most need help. Lives are on the line. People are in desperate situations. Have the decency to tell them the truth.
President Biden at the White House. Congresswoman Anapolina Luna, Republican of Florida, whose district includes St. Petersburg and Pinellas County, where Hurricane Milton made landfall, posting on X, just got off the phone with President Biden. He is personally overseeing that FEMA does not create problems with the debris removal and is supportive of the $15 billion in FEMA funds only for hurricane victims. If Congress goes into a special session, we can get it passed immediately. This needs to happen. Speaker Johnson, call us back. That post from Congresswoman Anapolina Luna. Story from Fox News. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas confirmed on Thursday that FEMA will need more funds after responding to hurricanes Helene and Milton. Mayorkas made the statement while answering questions from reporters at the White House press briefing on Thursday. He said FEMA has enough funds to address the immediate needs of people affected by both hurricanes, but urged Congress to move quickly. But a New York Times article reads, Small Business Administration officials warned on Tuesday that the agency would very soon exhaust its funding for new disaster loans for homeowners and businesses in the wake of Hurricane Helene. The agency has less than $100 million for new disaster loans, according to the officials, and will continue to process incoming loan applications after the money runs out, but Congress will have to approve additional funding for it to make new loan offers and cut checks. That was from the New York Times. President Biden was asked about this as he finished up his remarks at the White House.
On FEMA funding, how much time does Congress have to act before FEMA or the SBA run out of money?
That's in discussion now. I don't want to mislead you. I think in terms of the SBA, it's pretty right at the edge right now. And I think the Congress should be coming back and moving on the emergency needs immediately. And they're going to have to come back after the election as well, because this is going to be a long haul for total rebuilding. It's going to take several $1 billion. It's not going to be a matter of just a little bit. But we're providing now to make sure people have the emergency relief they need. The dollars just to be able to get a prescription filled, to get a baby formula done. All the things, that $750 that they're talking about, but Mr. Trump and all those other people know it's a lie to suggest that's all they're going to get. That's bizarre. It's bizarre. They got to stop this. They're being so damn un-American with the way they're talking about this stuff. But there's going to be a need for significant amounts of money. We're already underway at trying to calculate what the cost will be because we don't want to mislead anybody. We want to make sure all the costs are able to be covered.
Have you spoken to Speaker Johnson about coming back before the election to vote?
No, I haven't.
Mr. President, so are you calling on Congress to come back early?
I think Congress should move as rapidly as they can, particularly on the most immediate need, which is small business.
But are you the Vice President said yesterday that FEMA has what it needs. There's enough resources. That Congress does not need to come back, right?
FEMA has its needs. That's different than SBA.
Okay, so it's SBA. They need to come back and do SBA.
Yeah, but they're going to need a lot more.
Mr. President, what did Prime Minister Netanyahu tell you about his plans relating to retaliation?
He's coming over to help with a storm.
Mr. President, have you spoken with former President Trump at all?
Are you kidding me? Mr. President Trump, former President Trump, get a life, man. Help these people.
Will you hold him accountable?
President Biden at the White House. The House and Senate are scheduled to return to session in Washington after the November elections in December. House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, was asked about SBA funding during a news conference on Wednesday in Asheville in western North Carolina, where he was surveying the Hurricane Helene recovery.
Do you anticipate maybe bringing Congress back before recess ends?
Well, the way the SBA loan program, this is another, source of confusion. The way the SBA loan program works is that it is a lifeline, a vital lifeline for small businesses, which is the heart and soul of the American economy. And Congress, everybody here, all of us, and I think this is bipartisan, we are going to do everything necessary to take care of our small business owners. But the way the loan program works is that is money that comes from the federal government that supplements insurance payouts, okay? So obviously, we're only 13 days past the storm. It takes a while for all these small businesses to work through that process, submit their claims to their insurers, and work through all of that, and then the SBA loan program kicks in. And so the SBA has plenty of money right now to serve the immediate needs, and those that are being submitted already, they'll work on. And when Congress returns to session right after the election, that'll be one of the first agenda items that we have to address. So of course, we'll replenish that fund. We'll have to, because the magnitude of this storm is larger than anyone probably expected. And let's not forget, another one is about to hit Florida as we speak. I mean, it's going to hit tonight. So Congress is going to have a lot on its plate to address, but Congress will, because we're going to provide principled leadership and do what is necessary to take care of America first. When we say America first, that's what we mean. We have to take care of our own household, our own house, metaphorically, before we talk about the rest of the neighborhood.
U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, on Wednesday in Asheville, North Carolina. This is Washington Today. Story from the Washington Post: inflation continued to cool in September, extending a trend of easing price increases and an improving economy that has yet to convince many Americans with the election nearing. The Consumer Price Index fell slightly to 2.4% in September from a year earlier, according to the Labor Department, missing economists' expectations because of less progress on food prices. Still, the annual rate hasn't been this low since February 2021. That was from the Washington Post. Former President Donald Trump, Republican presidential nominee, talked about inflation at the Detroit Economic Club.
It was just announced that inflation came in substantially hotter than expected last month, double what was predicted, with much of the gain coming from food prices going up, rent and housing costs going up, and car prices going up. Interest rates, as you know, are also a big factor. They're very high. They've gone from 2% when I was in office to 10% now, and you can't get the money. That means it's much higher than 10%, which really kills the American dream for young people. We have a lot of young people here, a lot of college people here. The fact is that the Federal Reserve brought the interest rates down a little too quickly. It was too big a cut, and everyone knows that was a political maneuver that they tried to do before the election, but they did the wrong thing. It was totally a political decision, and inflation has started to rise. 4 years ago, when I left office, we had no inflation. We had virtually, just think of it, we had virtually no inflation for the entire 4 years. So when people made money, that was really their money. It wasn't money that they have to give back to a source that they know nothing about, including government. Under Biden and Harris, because of inflation, the economy has been a total disaster. But Kamala says that she can't think of one thing that she would do differently. She said that 2 days ago in a very unfortunate interview for her.
Former President Donald Trump, Republican presidential nominee, today at the Detroit Economic Club. He also said during his remarks that he would propose, if he is elected in November, making interest on car loans fully deductible. He said it would stimulate massive domestic auto production and make car ownership dramatically more affordable for millions and millions of working American families. You can find his full speech at our video library at cspan.org. On the inflation report, Lael Brainerd, the White House National Economic Advisor, putting out a statement. Today's report shows inflation has fallen back down to 2.4%, the same rate as right before the pandemic. We keep making progress with inflation returning to pre-pandemic levels, 16 million jobs created, lower interest rates, and low unemployment. Our economy has grown 3.2% per year under the Biden-Harris administration, stronger than during the previous administration. That was a statement from Lael Brainerd, White House National Economic Advisor. Austin Goolsbee is president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. He was interviewed on CNBC today about the inflation report.
Every time we talk, I always say, let's not get worked up out of one report. These are noisy series. Inflation came in around what people were expected. There was improvement on the housing front on inflation that was masked a little bit by deterioration on the goods front. But the overall trend is what's important, not the day-to-day fluctuations. And the overall trend over 12, 18 months is clearly that inflation has come down a lot and the job market has cooled to a level which is around where we think full employment is. And we'd like to get both of them to stay kind of in the space where they are right now. And that's what I'm thinking about. That's what everybody's thinking about when we're trying to set policy.
Also, when you talk about setting policy and kind of looking through the data, are you still in a process here, or will you be over the next, say, several meetings in a process here of trying to use the word that the chair has used, recalibrate policy to take account for the prior decline in inflation?
In a way, it depends what the definition. As you know, the rules of the FOMC, I only speak for myself, and I'm speaking for anybody, and certainly not for the chair. I found myself in total agreement with the spirit of what the chair said in the press conference, which is, as I view what's happened, we've gone through a long period where we had almost exclusive attention to the inflation side of the mandate because we had to. Inflation was way higher than the target, and the job market was white hot and extremely strong. And we've shifted now to a more normal environment, a balanced risk environment, where we got to think about both sides of the mandate, maximizing employment and stabilizing the prices. And when the hardest thing, as I always say, the hardest thing that the central bank has to do is to try to get the timing right when there's these moments of transition. And so, to me, it's been a series of close call type meetings, and there'll probably be more close call type meetings. But we get to meet every 6 weeks precisely because we want to get it right and not get too far ahead or too far behind.
Austin Goolsbee is president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago, interviewed today on CNBC. On Wall Street, the Dow down 57, NASDAQ down 9, S&P down 11. Social Security Administration announces that the cost of living adjustment, or COLA, for monthly benefits for 2025 will be 2.5%. About 70 million Americans get Social Security or Supplemental Security income checks. The COLA in 2024 was 3.2%, and in 2023 it was 8.7%. An article at CNBC, TD Bank pleaded guilty Thursday in a criminal money laundering case and agreed to pay a whopping $3 billion in fines and other penalties to the Department of Justice and federal financial regulators for failing to monitor money laundering by drug cartels. As part of the deal, TD Bank, whose U.S. unit is the 10th largest American bank by assets, is accepting limits on its growth, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency announced Thursday. That was from CNBC. The announcement of the plea came from Attorney General Merrick Garland at a Justice Department news conference.
Today, TD Bank pled guilty to multiple felonies, including conspiring to violate the Bank Secrecy Act and commit money laundering. TD Bank has also agreed to a $1.8 billion criminal penalty. Combined with civil enforcement actions announced today by other agencies, the United States will be imposing a total of approximately $3 billion against TD Bank. TD Bank created an environment that allowed financial crime to flourish. By making its services convenient for criminals, it became one. Today, TD Bank became the largest bank in U.S. history to plead guilty to Bank Secrecy Act program failures and the first bank in history to plead guilty to conspiracy to commit money laundering. This is also the largest ever penalty under the Bank Secrecy Act and the first time the Justice Department has assessed a daily fine against a bank. As part of the plea agreement, TD Bank will fundamentally restructure its corporate compliant program at its U.S.-based bank, which is the 10th largest in the United States. The bank has also agreed to the imposition of a 3-year monitorship and a 5-year term of probation. While the bank has started its remediation, it will continue to remediate and improve its anti-money laundering compliance program to ensure that the bank operates lawfully and safely moving forward. In addition to obtaining today's corporate felony pleas, the Justice Department has also prosecuted 24 individuals for their involvement in money laundering schemes that moved over $670 million in illicit funds through TD Bank accounts. So far, the Justice Department has charged 2 TD Bank employees for their involvement in one of these schemes. Pursuant to the plea agreement, TD Bank is required to fully cooperate with the Justice Department's investigation of the bank and any of its officers, directors, and employees. If the bank fails to do so, it will again be subject to criminal prosecution, in which the statement of facts that are part of the plea agreement may be used as evidence against it. Our criminal investigations into individual employees at every level of TD Bank are active and ongoing. As is the case in all corporate criminal matters, no one involved in TD Bank's illegal conduct will be off limits. We will follow the evidence wherever it leads.
Attorney General Merrick Garland at a news conference today at the Justice Department in Washington. Bharat Masrani, Group President and Chief Executive Officer of TD Bank Group, putting out a statement. We have taken full responsibility for the failures of our U.S. anti-money laundering program and are making the investments, changes, and enhancements required to deliver on our commitments. This is a difficult chapter in our bank's history. These failures took place on my watch as CEO, and I apologize to all stakeholders. I want to thank our colleagues who continue to demonstrate their dedication and who play an important role in preventing criminal activity. Washington Today continues in a moment.
C-SPAN's evening newsletter, Word for Word, brings you a recap of the day's most important events. Find out what happened on Capitol Hill, the White House, and with policymakers, all delivered straight to your inbox. Subscribe now at cspan.org/connect.
The House will be in order.
This year, C-SPAN celebrates 45 years of covering Congress like no other. Since 1979, we've been your primary source for Capitol Hill, providing balanced, unfiltered coverage of government, taking you to where the policy is debated and decided, all with the support of America's cable companies. C-SPAN, 45 years and counting, powered by cable.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the C-SPAN Now mobile app that's free and wherever you find your podcasts. C-SPAN's Campaign 2024 coverage includes not just the presidential election, but also U.S. Senate contests and competitive House races that will decide whether Democrats or Republicans control Congress starting in January. Here now is a look at 2 Senate races, Maryland and Arizona. In Maryland, a new poll from the University of Maryland-Baltimore County's Institute of Politics has Democratic candidate, Prince George's County Executive Angela Alsobrooks, ahead of the Republican candidate, former Governor Larry Hogan, by 9 percentage points, 48% to 39%. The two debated today at Maryland Public Television in Owings Mills, Maryland. Moderator was Chuck Todd of NBC News.
Ms. Alsobrooks, you and your party have been campaigning against Governor Hogan by singling out his party affiliation, almost solely, more so than anything else. Is his major disqualification for this office simply that he's a member of the Republican Party?
Well, first of all, I have to tell you that the stakes of this election could not be any higher. We are facing an election where the future of our country and our freedoms are at stake. What we recognize is in this election, a woman's right to choose is on the ballot. What we know is that the former governor is a person who vetoed important abortion care legislation and also vetoed important legislation that would have created a simple ban on ghost guns and would have also disallowed long guns. It created a waiting period. The Republican Party has declared war on women's reproductive freedoms. We recognize that this party of chaos and division that is led by Donald Trump is one that cannot lead our country and also has severe consequences for Marylanders. Unfortunately, former Governor Hogan accepted an invitation by Mitch McConnell to run in this race because they want to give Republicans a majority in the Senate. Doing so will control Supreme Court justice nominations, will also control cabinet appointments for President Kamala Harris, and I do not believe that having a majority controlled by Republicans is in the best interest of our state or our country.
Mr. Hogan, you have 1 minute.
Well, we're going to hear an awful lot about this kind of talk all night. That's the way they talk in Washington. I can tell you that just trying to focus on nothing but party is not what I'm going to do. You're going to hear nothing but red versus blue. I care a lot more about the red, white, and blue. I've been the leading voice in my party standing up to some of the things you're talking about, and everything you just said, your entire campaign is based on, multiple things that are completely not true. I will support and will sponsor codifying Roe. I've said that from the beginning. When I was governor, when I ran for governor, I promised to support women's access to abortion, and I delivered on that promise for 8 years. The bill you're referring to was about protecting women because it was rolling back and making it less safe for women to get access to abortion. It was allowing non-medical professionals. And for you to lie about something as important as this issue, it really is insulting.
Part of the Maryland U.S. Senate debate today between Larry Hogan, former governor, Republican candidate, and Angela Alsobrooks, Prince George's County executive, Democratic candidate. Story from Fox News. Arizona Democratic Congressman Ruben Gallego faced off against Republican challenger Kari Lake on Wednesday night and wasted no time exchanging blows over the illegal immigration crisis plaguing the state's southern border. Lake, trailing behind Gallego entering into the debate, appeared much more on the offensive. Meanwhile, Gallego, a five-term member in Congress, appeared more relaxed given his comfortable lead in several recent polls. That's how Fox News put it. The debate was in Phoenix. Here's a portion of it, beginning with Congressman Gallego.
Absolutely not. I do not support open borders. A country that doesn't have a border they control is not a country. I absolutely agree with that. And to say that, I've been very proud of making sure that in my time in Congress, I have voted and brought thousands of Border Patrol agents to Arizona, have voted and funded hundreds of miles of border walls where needed, where our experts wanted it. This is why I'm supportive of the border enforcement bill, the compromise bill that was supported by Border Patrol. And Kari Lake, for still no reason why she can explain it, she can't explain it why she was against that bill. Now, this is why we have more support from border mayors than she does. As a matter of fact, there's one border mayor that started with her on the campaign, met with her in front of the border wall with her campaign sign, and now is supporting us because he knows that we're not just talk, we're not just rhetoric. We're here to bring the resources to actually control the border and not just use it as a talking point, which is what Kari Lake does.
Mrs. Lake, a minute to respond.
He voted against President Trump's national emergency on the border. He said the border's not that big of a deal in Arizona when he was talking to people who were donating money to his campaign, and said he's not an expert on the border. We need somebody who understands the threat on the border, and I do. And President Trump does, and on day one, we're going to get busy undoing the damage caused by Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, and Ruben Gallego, who's voted with them 100% of the time. Can you imagine voting with the Kamala Harris and Joe Biden 100% of the time, especially when it comes to the border? You know, this isn't just about an open border. We've got 20 million people pouring in. They're taking jobs, they're taking housing. This is why nobody can afford housing anymore, because we're having to compete with people who've come in illegally. I am completely opposed to an open border. I am 100% for legal immigration. My mother-in-law came here legally, and all of the incredible immigrants of this country who came here legally are horrified by the votes that my opponent has taken. They're horrified by what Kamala Harris has done.
Kari Lake, Republican candidate for U.S. Senate in Arizona, debating the Democratic nominee Ruben Gallego Wednesday night in Phoenix. Part of C-SPAN's extensive coverage of Campaign 2024, House races, Senate races, and the presidential race. You can find all the debates archived at our website at cspan.org. A new Emerson College Polling the Hill poll conducted in the past week shows Ruben Gallego at 50% and Kari Lake at 43% in that race. Story from NBC News. An Afghan man arrested on charges of planning a terrorist attack on Election Day worked as a security guard in Afghanistan for the CIA. Two sources with knowledge of the matter told NBC News. Nasser Ahmed Tawedi, 27 years old, was arrested on Monday in Oklahoma and accused of plotting to kill Americans with an assault rifle on behalf of ISIS. Court documents said he had contributed to an ISIS charity in March and accessed online ISIS propaganda, but they did not say whether he was radicalized before or after he came to the U.S. in 2021. That was from NBC News. At today's White House briefing with the Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre, she was asked about this.
Thanks, Karine. Following up on Jackie's question from earlier on the Afghan terror suspect, NBC is reporting that he was a security guard for the CIA before he came to the U.S. and that he passed 2 rounds of vetting. Does the administration believe there was adequate vetting?
So what I can say is I cannot comment on this directly because it is an active investigation, as you know, that the Department of Justice is currently moving forward with, so I'm going to be really careful. What I can say is every Afghan national who entered the U.S. was screened and vetted by intelligence, law enforcement, counterterrorism professionals, and with every new information that emerges, if that individual could pose a threat to public safety, we take immediate action, and we take that action. And so I'm not going to speak to this particular case, but I can speak more broadly, and that's the actions that we normally take. That's how we move forward. And the president has always been clear, protecting the American people will always be his top priority.
Broadly, what would you say to critics who say there isn't enough vetting in these cases?
What I can say is how I just ended my last question to you. Protecting the American people is the president's top priority.
The White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre at her daily news conference in the White House briefing room. On the war in the Middle East, from Reuters, Israeli forces fired on 2 positions used by UN peacekeepers in Lebanon on Thursday, and at a third one on Wednesday, the UN force said, as Israel warned Lebanese civilians not to return to homes in the south and pressed on with its assault on Hezbollah. The UNIFIL force said 2 of its peacekeepers were injured in one of the incidents when an Israeli tank fired at a watchtower at the force's main headquarters, hitting the tower and causing them to fall. There were no casualties in the other 2 incidents, a UN source said. That was from Reuters. At the Pentagon, Press Secretary Pat Ryder questioned about that.
Today we saw the UN peacekeeping force in Lebanon said that the Israeli army military deliberately targeted their bases, their watchtowers on multiple occasions in the past 24 hours. There was also videos that the Israelis destroyed a Lebanese army watchtower in the south. In the past couple of days, we've seen Israeli military plant an Israeli flag inside of Lebanese territory, on territory that's not disputed between the two. Homes of U.S. officials, current officials, of relatives, of the U.S. People serving in the U.S. government have been destroyed. Indisputable evidence that there's no Hezbollah weapons there. So how do you square that circle in terms of the support for what you guys have said is Israel's limited ground operations? Or do you condemn any of these that I just mentioned, or do you believe that these align with U.S. interests?
Yeah, thanks, Joseph. So lot to break down there. So first of all, as it relates to the reports that you highlight in terms of UNFIL or LAF, certainly those reports are concerning. I don't have any information to independently corroborate those reports. I'd refer you to the IDF to talk about their operations in that regard. Certainly, we do not want to see non-combatants targeted as operations are being conducted. All indications that we have right now is that Israel continues to conduct limited ground operations across the border to remove Hezbollah attack infrastructure. And again, we've highlighted that we fully support Israel's right to defend itself, and we understand the threat that Hezbollah has posed for the last year. Ultimately, at the end of the day, though, again, I'd go back to our belief that for long-term security and stability, the best way to do that is through diplomatic means. So we'll continue to work toward that end.
Pentagon Press Secretary Pat Ryder, an Air Force Major General at the Pentagon News Conference. UNIFIL is United Nations interim force in Lebanon, created in 1978. This topic also came up at the United Nations News Conference with the deputy spokesperson for the UN Secretary General, Farhan Haq.
You will have seen that the UN interim force in Lebanon, UNIFIL, issued a statement this morning saying that 2 of its peacekeepers were injured after an IDF Merkava tank fired its weapon towards an observation tower in UNIFIL's headquarters in Nakura, directly hitting it and causing them to fall. The injuries are fortunately this time not serious, but the peacekeepers remain in a hospital. In a separate incident, Israeli Defense Force soldiers also fired on UN position 131 in Labune, hitting the entrance to the bunker where peacekeepers were sheltering and damaging vehicles and a communication system. An IDF drone was observed flying inside the UN position up to the bunker entrance. Also, UNIFIL says that yesterday, IDF soldiers deliberately fired at and disabled the position's perimeter monitoring cameras. They also deliberately fired on UNP 132A in Ras Nakura, where regular tripartite meetings were held before the conflict began. Lights and a relay station were damaged. UNIFIL reminds the IDF and all parties of their obligations to ensure the safety and security of UN personnel and property, and to respect the inviolability of UN premises at all times. UNIFIL peacekeepers are present in South Lebanon to support a return to stability under a Security Council mandate. Any deliberate attack on peacekeepers is a grave violation of international humanitarian law and of Security Council Resolution 1701. Our peacekeepers are following up with the IDF on these matters. This comes as the recent escalation along the Blue Line is causing widespread destruction of towns and villages in South Lebanon, while rockets continue to be launched towards Israel, including civilian areas. In the past days, our peacekeepers say incursions from Israel into Lebanon were seen in Nakura and other areas. IDF soldiers have clashed with Hezbollah elements on the ground in Lebanon.
Farhan Haq is deputy spokesperson for the United Nations Secretary General at a news conference today at the UN in New York City. The IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, releasing a statement. The Hezbollah terrorist organization operates from within and near civilian areas in southern Lebanon, including areas near UNIFIL posts. The IDF is operating in southern Lebanon and maintains routine communication with UNIFIL. This morning, Thursday, IDF troops operated in the area of Nakura next to a UNIFIL base. Accordingly, the IDF instructed the UN forces in the area to remain in protected spaces, following which the forces opened fire in the area. That statement from the IDF. U.S. Senator Mark Warner, Democrat from Virginia, chair of the Intelligence Committee, was at the Atlantic Council today in Washington. At a program titled Election 2024, Senator Mark Warner on the global risks facing the next president. He started off talking about 5 areas of the world he said are not getting enough attention from elected leaders.
I'm going to hit 5 spots that I think, frankly, even Biden could see some progress on, or if not, the next president has to, that aren't getting the kind of attention that I think would warrant. One, and I'll kind of move from north to south and then west. The circumstances in Venezuela ought to be receiving more attention. We asked the Venezuelan people to come out and vote. They voted in record numbers. It was an overwhelming defeat for Maduro, yet we've not been able to rally nation states in the region, and prospects for that country I think are very dim at this point. And when Maduro is sworn in again, if we don't make some changes, we could see another mass of Venezuelans leaving, which would put additional strain on the border. Second, and it's something that gets virtually no attention, it goes to what you mentioned about China in terms of energy, is the increasing role that Australia and Oceania will play. I mean, there are dozens of island nations in that region of the world, many of which we don't even have an embassy in. The Australians do, thank goodness, and China does. But each of these nation states have coverage in terms of the amount of ocean they control, where there are these rare earth minerals that are staggering. And for a little bit of attention, we could go a hell of a long way.
I know you got 3 more to get to.
I got 3 more, and they'll be quick.
College, so he said 2, and we said 5. So I did some complex math. You talking about like a Myanmar where they actually do the recycling of the lithium?
I'm talking about
Borneo.
Papua New Guinea. I'm talking about the Solomon Islands. I'm talking about Vanuatu. I'm talking about nation states that most Americans, frankly, probably I couldn't even identify a couple of years back.
Is it because of the waterway? I'm getting back to World War II naval history.
It is getting back to some of that, but it's more the fact that that small nation state that may only have 100,000 people, they have, based upon what they claim is their ocean mineral rights, an area mass that may be larger than Alaska and Texas combined. And
undersea,
where a lot of these minerals exist. And we have ignored these nations. We're starting to put a little bit of time in, bringing them, frankly, broadband, partnering with our tech companies, huge opportunity. Let me get through these next three because we're going to have a lot of topics. In China, lots of the normal stuff that we're going to talk about, but I think in energy, China is making huge gains. I'm a big advocate for reintroduction of advanced nuclear, small modular reactors. There will be a competition with China that we are engaged in. We need to move quicker. With that is what China's been doing in life sciences and bio. And just as nobody had heard of Huawei maybe 8 years ago, the company that I think will be on people's lips going forward is BGI, Beijing Genomics Institute. Huge challenges there. That was 3. 4, in the Middle East, obviously we've got the wars going on, but there is also a geopolitical move that I think could be one of the most transformative of the next 25 years as the Saudis, the Emiratis, and the other Gulf states, based upon their own decision to transform their economies to more technology-based, the race for data centers and AI, they, I believe, will make the decision to stop playing off against China and Russia and go with us because they want our technology. How we navigate that, the G42 Microsoft deal is the kind of tip of the spear on that, is something that needs a lot more attention. And then finally, a place where I'm spending a lot of time trying to learn, get myself educated, is the crisis in Sudan. There are more people dying every day in Sudan than Gaza, Lebanon, and Ukraine combined. And if America could show that we actually care about Africans killing Africans, and candidly, both sides in the Sudan conflict are bad. You don't have to pick a moral choice. Both sides are bad. A little bit of effort there, and that does wind back to your Angola question, showing that we care about Africa, where, based by about 2040, most of the world's population increase, all the rare earth minerals, a little bit of effort will go a heck of a long way.
Senator Mark Warner, Democrat from Virginia, Intelligence Committee Chair at the Atlantic Council today. President Joe Biden had planned this week to travel to Germany and then to Angola. It would be his first visit to Africa as president, but he had to postpone it to stay and oversee the response to Hurricane Milton. White House said that President Biden called the president of Angola today to speak with him and thank him for his continued leadership. Story from ABC News. Ethel Kennedy, a matriarch of America's most celebrated political family who carried on her husband Robert F. Kennedy's fight for civil justice after witnessing his assassination on the night he won the 1968 California Democratic presidential primary, has died at the age of 96. In 2014, then-President Barack Obama presented Ethel Kennedy with the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
And finally, we give thanks to a person whose love for her family is matched by her devotion to her nation. To most Americans, Ethel Kennedy is known as a wife, mother, and grandma. And in many ways, it's through these roles that she's made her mark on history. As Bobby Kennedy's partner in life, she shared his commitment to justice. After his death, she continued their work through the center she created in his name, celebrating activists and journalists and educating people around the world about threats to human liberty. On urgent human rights issues of our time, from juvenile justice to environmental destruction, Ethel has been a force for change in her quiet, flashy, unflashy, unstoppable way. As her family will tell you, and they basically occupy this half of the room, you don't mess with Ethel. She's gone to extraordinary lengths to build support for the causes close to her heart, including helping to raise money for ALS research this summer by pouring a bucket of ice water over her head. As you may know, she nominated me to do it as well, and as you may know, I chose to write a check instead. I grew up in Hawaii. I don't like pouring ice water on top of my head. That is probably the only time I've ever said no to Ethel, by the way. Ethel is the matriarch of a patriotic family, and with her encouragement, many of her children and grandchildren are carrying on the Kennedy tradition of public service. She's an emblem of enduring faith and enduring hope, even in the face of unimaginable loss and unimaginable grief. And she has touched the lives of countless people around the world with her generosity and her grace. It gives me great pleasure to present this award, which her brother-in-law, President Kennedy, reestablished more than 50 years ago.
From 2014 at the White House, then President Barack Obama at the Medal of Freedom ceremony. From C-SPAN's video library, Ethel Kennedy has died at the age of 96. President Joe Biden putting out a lengthy statement that begins, Ethel Kennedy was an American icon, a matriarch of optimism and moral courage, an emblem of resilience and service, devoted to family and country. She had a spine of steel and a heart of gold that inspired millions of Americans, including me and Jill. We were blessed to call her a dear friend. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Subscribe to C-SPAN's free evening newsletter, word for word, and get the stories making headlines in Washington emailed to you every day. You can sign up at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.